Welcome to Thrive Deeper, the show based on the Thrive Bible reading guides. This is an ongoing conversation about God's Word with Thrive's author, Dr. Matthew Jacoby, and your host, DJ Payne.
G'day and welcome to episode 98 of Thrive Deeper. It's your old pal DJ Payne here, and on this week's episode, Matthew Jacoby and myself sit down and we go through the middle part of the book of Revelation. Man, talk about biting off more than we can chew. There's a lot here that we need to get through, so it's an extra long episode this week. We apologise for that in advance. But also, the great news is we've got the details locked in for Thrive Deeper episode 100. We've got a date. You're going to want to circle that on the calendar where we will be streaming live video of Thrive Deeper episode 100. And we want you to be involved. Yeah, that's right. We want your questions to come on in. So please stay tuned. We've got all that information for you as we go through this most exciting book of victory, the book of Revelation, here on Thrive Deeper. Matthew, we are biting off, I'm going to say right at the beginning here, more than we can chew today.
I've just been looking over the chapters that we're going to look at. We got some heavy stuff.
Yeah. When you came in this morning, and
it's all the sensational stuff today. We're going to be red dragons, the number of the beast, the beast from the earth, the sea, the Antichrist.
Yeah,
it's all in today's episode, folks. Roll up.
It's exactly it. This is the center of the story of the book of Revelation. We're right in the middle, and it's like, okay, we were getting the scene set for some pretty drastic things to happen. My goodness, from chapter 10 onwards, it literally a switch gets thrown, and we're in high mode of just absolute heightened everything is happening.
Yeah, that's right. So we've had the seven seals.
Yes.
Then the seventh seal gets broken, and you get the seven trumpets. Mm-hmm. And now, before the seventh trumpet, we're about to get the seven bowls.
Yes.
But we have this interlude, and the interludes are important. A lot of very significant things happen in the interludes.
Yep.
So the seals describe what happens on the earth, and the interludes, you generally get a heavenly picture of some kind.
Yes.
So we get this. So we're finished with the six trumpets. Sorry,
yes.
and we're about to get the seventh trumpet that's going to usher in the seven bowls.
Exactly. So we finished last episode. We wrapped up on chapter 9, and we sort of left. Chapter 9 finishes in a really dark place. That God is doing all of this work, pouring out His wrath, giving examples of what to do, but yet time and time again in Matthew, your sort of overarching meta theme here for the book of Revelation, the polarization of the world.
Yeah.
The good is getting better in heaven, and the people who are sealed by God, and the worse and the bad is getting worse.
Yeah, that's right.
The bad people, no matter what's going on, they are committing themselves to pursuing sin. And that leads us into chapter 10.
That's right. The bad are getting badder and the good are getting gooder.
That's one way of saying it.
Yeah, that's one way of saying it. Well, the interesting thing about this interlude is that, again, like the last interlude in chapter 7, where it focuses on the role of God's people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is really, important because, again, remember, the authority was given over the earth to mankind in Genesis chapter 1 and 2.
Yes.
And so you get this sense of the crucial place of mankind in this. I mean, this is why the scroll could only be given to one like a son of man.
Yeah.
Who's this God, fully man.
Yes.
Who is on the one hand seen as human, but on the other hand seen as divine. And yet it's his humanity that enables him to be worthy to open the scroll.
Yes.
And so he can implement this. But there is this crucial role for God's people. We've seen this in the prayers of the saints that went up, and then the judgment comes down.
Yeah.
So we've seen the crucial role of prayer in this. Now, the symbol that we have in chapter 10, it has this picture where this mighty angel comes and he's holding this scroll, and he's standing. You can picture this massive figure, it appeals to our imaginations in terms of how massive this figure is, because 1 foot in the sea and 1 foot on the land. This is like Pacific Rim Godzilla kind of stuff going on.
Exactly.
So and he has this scroll, and he actually hands the scroll in chapter 10. He hands the scroll to John, and he says, "Eat the scroll." Now, what does that remind you of?
Straight away, we're taken right back to this. Is the beauty of the Old Testament is if you're familiar with the Book of Revelation, it's like a greatest hits of the prophets of the Book of Revelation.
Yeah, that's right.
It really is of the times that Ezekiel was given. Was Ezekiel?
Ezekiel given the scroll to eat. So it's one of those instances where the whole prophetic tradition, leading up to this, is now culminated and in different ways referred to and alluded to throughout this book of Revelation. This is really the amazing thing about this book, the way that it puts the lid on prophecy after prophecy after prophecy. And so the idea here is that he's given this scroll, and the idea here is that he is told to prophesy. And again, we think of Ezekiel prophesying to the valley of dry bones. So God is going to raise up Israel, who are in exile at the time of Ezekiel, and he takes him to this valley of dry bones, and this is symbolizing Israel. And he says to Ezekiel, "Prophesy to the dry bones." And as Ezekiel prophesies, they come alive. So it's God working through a human agent. Why? Because we're put in charge. So John is to perform this prophetic act of this, being this person that prophesies, so that what is now going to take place will take place through this act of prophesying it. So it's going to be spoken by a human agent, and through that means God is going to bring about these judgments to follow.
There's something that is so rich. It's so rich in this. And chapter 10 is so mysterious, and it's almost like a meta level of understanding what is going on. Because this is one of the mysteries of the universe that we live in, and I love personally living in a universe like this. That there are these heavenly beings, there's this spiritual beings bigger than what we understand, greater than what we understand, and we're getting senses of that with these angels and eagles and all this other stuff, these heavenly operators coming in and taking part of God's plan. And this angel speaks out, and then we have the 7 thunders answering him. What are the 7 thunders?
Well, there's interesting reference that because it says, you're referring to verse 3 when it says, "And he gave a loud shout." This is the angel with his foot in the land and one in the sea, like a roar of a lion. And when he shouted, the voices of the 7 thunders spoke. It's actually a reference to Psalm 29. In Psalm 29, we have this phrase, "The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is majestic." And it's thundering. It's back in verse 3 of Psalm 29, "The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord thunders over the mighty waters." Now again, mighty waters. We've got the same picture of chaos, and so it's this is, and it says that 7 times. It's the voice of the Lord is 7 times taking command over the chaos. So he's referring back to that.
I know. So you've got this reference to that, and the 7 thunders, God or whatever, however God is expressing, answers, and it's amazing what it says. So and John, being the good steward that he is like, right, okay, I've got to write it, and then no, do not write this down. Like, again, this is, I had 2 great conversations in the last couple of weeks of my science fiction analogy, of not analogy, but the truth that I believe we're living in, that John is a real life time traveler. We say, we look at time travel, we go, whatever. But I go, well, actually, as Christians, we believe in time travel because John was taken to the future and sent back.
That's right,
And here we see that classic trope in science fiction that you see in time travel. Don't cross the streams. Don't let this happen like this. Like God is saying, this here is only meant for this time here that you're seeing.
That's right.
Do not write it down.
So
Do
there's
not record
secrets. So it's not to reveal any
Yes.
specifics about that.
Yeah.
You know, and so you're right in saying the voice of the seven thunders. It's the voice of God in a sense answering. But the interesting thing here is that this message is entrusted to John.
Yeah.
And this is the key thing about this. And right at the end of chapter 10, it says, and then I was told you must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings. Okay.
Yep.
So he's going to prophesy this, and it's going to come about like the dry bones are going to come to life because of Ezekiel's act of prophesying.
Yep.
This is going to happen through, you know, John's act of. So John, in a sense, becomes the Ezekiel-like prophet, that announces these things, and in a sense, here he stands for, in a very important sense, he stands for God's people. I don't think this is not just about John.
Yes,
this is about this,
great point.
because we've already heard about the prayers of God's people bringing about these things. So the prayers go up and the judgments come down. We saw that earlier, but now the prophecy goes out, and it actually causes things to happen.
Yep.
So there's prayer and this prophecy. And I think this is standing for this kind of prophetic role that God's people have, you know, as we go out with the gospel, as we go out with the truth. There's not just a sense of, we're letting people know a bit of nice information. It's actually through our testimony, because remember, which earlier on it talks about the
martyrs
Satan
overcoming.
that the martyrs overcame by the word of the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's I think imagined here is this prophetic act of the word of our testimony, you know, declaring, you know, the truth of God and the word of our testimony is actually going to bring about these things. God's going to do it through our prophetic word.
Yeah, I would. Again, this is me being, you know, I sort of get panicked about certain words. Bring about, I sort of go, well, I don't know. God's got to bring it about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
but He's doing it through the
that's
agency.
The point, yeah.
He's doing it through, He's doing it with us.
Yeah, that's right.
He's doing it with us
because He's committed Himself to that. Remember?
Yes, and you see, I reckon you see a part of that is when you in the middle of chapter 10. We'll get out of chapter 10 because we don't want to spend all day here. But you know, the angelic messenger who's humongous, standing in the sea and the land. I love this picture. Who roars out and God is answering back, and they're having this thing around the earth. John's not writing down exactly what they're saying because he's not allowed to.
Yeah.
That's a time capsule for later on. And then the angel swears by all of creation, everything that God has given, and he says, this is it. When this happens, God will wait long. You've always mankind has always said, why if God is real, why doesn't He fill in the blank?
Exactly. Yeah.
And there's almost the angel saying, right, you will wait no longer. God's total, and he uses that word, the mysterious plan of God is going to be fulfilled now.
Yeah, that's right.
Watch out. And John, take this, and John, it's going to happen through you as well.
Yeah.
Woo!
It's great. And I love the connection between the scroll with the seven seals that represents this, you know, the unfolding plan of God. Yep. And then in a sense, this is in this picture kind of given to John to exercise this human agency that's going to happen through this human agency as well. So it's a great picture.
Okay, let's move straight into chapter 11 here. And again, talking about Ezekiel, talking about all the prophets that were coming in, we go and we have another flashback to Ezekiel right at the beginning of chapter 11. And then I was given a measuring stick.
Absolutely.
To go back and measure. And I was like, hang on.
We've seen this. Yeah, we've already seen this. So a lot of Ezekiel. Now, again, in this, this is the section that speaks about the measuring of the temple and the two witnesses. Okay, so again, we're concerned here with human agency. It's the role of human agency, and I'm just thinking about how much complexity I'm going to go into here.
Yeah.
But so we've seen Ezekiel at the end of the book of Ezekiel.
Yes,
is told to measure out the temple.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chapter 40. Yeah,
that's right.
Yep.
So, and you get the same kind of thing happening here.
Yes.
So he says, go and measure the temple of God, the altar and its worshippers, but exclude the outer court. Do not measure it because it has been given to the Gentiles. Now, what is going on here? This could well. I mean, this is. Let me read to you. This is N.T. Wright,
Yes.
who I think has a good way of summarising things in a sort of simpler
Yes.
kind of framework. So this is why I read from him. Is just a good reference for that. He says John's measuring of the temple, which echoes similar prophetic actions in Ezekiel 40 and Zechariah 2, by the way, as well. That's another reference.
Yep.
Now he says here has nothing to do with the Jerusalem temple or with the heavenly temple throne room of chapters 4 and 5. By the time John was writing, indeed, this was true from very early on in the Christian movement. The followers of Jesus had come to see themselves as the true temple.
Yeah.
But the place where God now, which was the place where God now lived through his powerful spirit.
Wow.
Okay? So this is, the church is the temple. John is commanded to mark out this community so that, as in chapter 7, it may be protected against ultimate harm.
Wow.
However, there is another sense in which the community, seen here in terms of the outer court, is to be left vulnerable. The pagan nations will trample it for 3.5 years, a symbolic number half of 7, which stands for 7 stands for completeness.
Yes.
So a 3.5 year period, here broken down into 42 months or 1,260 days,
Yep.
indicates that it's cut short. So only for this short time. God's going to only allow this, not a complete time of trampling, but a shorter time. So he goes on to say, just as Ezekiel's measuring of this visionary temple was a way of marking out the place where God was going to come and dwell, so John's marking out of this human temple, this community, as a way of signalling God's solemn intention to honour and bless his people with his presence.
Yeah.
So now there are slightly different views on this. As
My goodness, we're in the book of Revelation.
yeah, and I mean. So there is a view that I guess sees this as a literal temple.
Yep.
On the whole, I think probably the majority would see this as kind of a symbolic, just given there's so much symbolism here.
But then the beauty of, and my response to all of that, and again, I think it's almost futile sometimes for us to try to figure out if it's symbolic or literal.
Well, it could actually be both as well.
And that's my point. I think it's actually both. I mean,
it depends if you think, because according to some views,
yes,
there is one view that believes that the temple will one day, Jerusalem
will be
temple
rebuilt.
will be rebuilt.
Yes.
Now, I don't think that is a necessary interpretation of certain prophecies on that. But it's certainly I'm not close to that possibility.
If it happens literally, then it makes a lot of sense. But if it doesn't happen literally, well, then it still
and I think it's important to recognise that even if it does happen, the temple always was a symbol beyond itself.
Yes.
The temple, even the physical temple, was still a symbol of the church.
And we have just spent the first half of the book looking into the representation of the temple in heaven, the 7 churches, all of that. So
the lampstands and all of that, it all symbolise God's church. So a very important theme in Revelation is this sense of God's church as God's temple.
Now, if we're taking it as a literal, for those of us who are taking it as a literal time and a literal places and literal things like that, we're now at the halfway mark through this tribulation. And it does get a little bit hard to measure, is this happening in the first half, the center half, where is it happening there? But I believe that most of the commentators who would look at this type of thing, this is the halfway mark of the tribulation, the 7-year tribulation. This final 3.5 years of the tribulation is going to be a horrific time, marked at the center by these 2 witnesses who come and who prophesy. Now, these 2 witnesses are, again, a Bible nerd's delight, because we're not told who they are named. Well, they're not named.
Yeah.
But the allusions, and there's been a lot of discussions about who these people are. Are they 2 saints that have been? Are they 2 Old Testament prophets? Who are they?
Okay.
Give us a definitive answer right now, Matt.
Well, let's talk about, but let's just summarize just so that we can put them in context.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So you've got this period of intense tribulation. Okay.
Yes.
It's a cut short time.
Yes.
Okay. Which is expressed in terms of 3.5 years.
Yep.
Now, is that going to literally be 3.5 years,
Yeah.
or is it just a symbolic way of referring to a period of time? It may be a literal 3.5 years, who knows? Anyway, the point is, so there's this period of tribulation, and even and here, the outer court, him not measuring the outer court seems to indicate that to some extent or in some way, either some part of the church or in some sense the church is going to experience something of this tribulation.
Yes.
Now some people see that differently. The outer courts, depending on what there's some different interpretations of the outer courts there. Mm-hmm. Okay, but anyway, so we have this period of tribulation.
Yep.
Within this period of tribulation, we have these two characters. This is where we get the two witnesses, okay,
yep.
who they go out, they do, it says... let me read it and comment because it's quite a dense section. And I will appoint my two witnesses, okay? And they will prophesy for 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth, okay? So straight away you're thinking of Elijah, okay? 1,260 days is your 3.5 year period. So they're going to be active during this tribulation period. Mm-hmm. They are the two olive trees and the two lampstands. Now, they are the two... two olive trees? Well, he's referring to Zechariah chapter 4 mm-hmm. Here, where he sees a gold lampstand, two olive trees,
yes.
and that stands for God's people in Zechariah. Yeah. And it's in that context that that God says over this situation, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord. Mm-hmm. So in Zechariah, they stand for God's people, but they also stand for Zerubbabel and Joshua the high priest, the
yes.
king and the priest.
Yes.
So in a sense, Jesus is the combination of those roles,
yep.
but it's also alluding, like the two witnesses here seem to echo that. Mm-hmm. So again, you've got like this... two people now what we're going to see they're like Moses and Elijah.
Yeah.
Think Transfiguration, that met with Jesus.
Yes.
They're the sort of two principal prophets of the Old Testament. So they are witnesses. The prophets were understood as witnesses. Mm-hmm. So we've got that picture. They're also alluding to Zerubbabel and Joshua the high priest in the back that form the background to Zechariah chapter 4.
Yes.
It's dense stuff, I told you.
I love it.
But it's bringing together all of these figures. Mm. So the point is that it's culminated, that they're this kind of thing, okay, these two witnesses. So it says, if anyone tries to harm them, fire comes from their mouths and devours their enemies.
Yes.
Think of what's the story, it's in 2 Kings 1, I think.
Where Elijah calls down fire.
Yeah, Elijah calls down fire.
From the altar, exactly.
But this time it comes from their mouths. Oh. Fire comes from their mouth and devours their enemies.
It's like they've been cranked into superheroes here, total Superman.
This is how anyone who wants to harm them must die. They have power to shut up the heavens so that it will not rain. Who does that remind you of? Elijah, that's right. During the time they're prophesying, and they have power to turn the waters into blood. Who does that remind you of? Moses, thank you very much. And to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they want. That's Moses as well, right? So they're going to have this Elijah, Moses kind of ministry. Now, when they've finished their testimony, the beast that comes up from the abyss will attack them and overpower and kill them.
Is this the beast that we've already seen before coming out of the abyss, that we've seen before, like out of the bottomless pit? Is that what it's...
Yeah. Okay, so there's a few...
Because the beast is referred to a few different...
Yeah, that's right. So certainly this is a satanic kind of figure here of some kind. Now, it may be the Antichrist or the beast referred to in Daniel chapter 7.
Yep.
It's been suggested this could be Satan himself, or maybe even more like a figure for a spirit of antagonism to God in some senses. It symbolizes the anti-Christian force in the world.
Yes.
But look, I think most people are thinking that this is like this Antichrist figure, and we're about to
be
encounter
introduced.
this.
Yes.
Okay, so I think most people are saying that the beast is who we're about to encounter. Like, look out for that, because
Yes.
we're going to talk about this next. Okay, so
they're killed by the
killed
beast.
by the beast. Okay, and we're going to read about the beast and the number of the beast and all this stuff. Okay, so it says their bodies will lie in the public square of the great city, which is figuratively called Sodom and Egypt,
Jerusalem.
Yeah. So it's actually like because Rome was referred to as the great city in this time. So this is like Jerusalem and Rome sort of merging here. So for 3.5 days, and they gaze upon their bodies, and the inhabitants of the earth gloat over them. And then after 3.5 days, now think about what happened after 3 days to Jesus. The breath of life from God entered them. Think of Ezekiel again.
Yep.
Okay, it's exactly the same turn of phrase as Ezekiel. And they stood to their feet. Exactly what is said when Ezekiel prophesies to the dry bones. Okay, so and terror struck those who saw them. Then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, "Come up here." And they went up to heaven in a cloud while their enemies looked on. It's just
unbelievable. It's
amazing stuff.
I love this so much.
So they're experiencing this resurrection and this ascension. I mean, so is this? The question has been asked about this. Are there literally going to be two people? Two witnesses, okay.
You know which way I lean. I want this all to be so literal.
Sure. Or is this a way, because of its connection with so many prophetic figures flowing out of the last chapter, where the scroll of prophecy is given to John, who in that sense symbolizes God's people. Yeah. So this scroll in a sense is given. Is this a way of connecting with that scroll, that this is kind of referring to the kind of martyrs, the witnesses and the martyrs, or again, is it both?
Yeah. Look, I definitely here's the point. Even if it's like I take this as very.
By the way, I like the literal. Yeah. I like the literal one here as well. I just want to allow for the fact that that there is a lot of symbolism here, and okay. Let's assume a literal.
Yes.
Let's assume a literal. Yep. Which we both like. In any case, they represent God's people.
Spot on. Yes, and the bigger picture here, and this is something we need to keep in mind about the Book of Revelation, especially when it starts getting dark like this, is even if you like me, you interpret as a literal events that have echoes and bounces around through the truth of it, bounces around through history with different representation. That's like how prophecy works.
Yeah.
It sort of bounces around history, and it has this weird sort of meta narrative through everything. But then all of it, you go, hang on, what is the purpose? Why did God give us this book now? Why did John travel through time, and space and heaven and earth and everything through different dimensions to give us this? It's not to make us fearful. It's to make us hopeful.
Yeah, totally.
It's to give us hope and to give us so. I think sometimes we can get lost with numbers, dates, trying to work it all out. Yeah. And this is the fun of it. I enjoy, as you can hear, we enjoy doing this. But then we go, hang on, whoa. What is this? Okay, things that these themes that are coming up time and time again in these middle chapters is we're going to get trampled. Yep. We're going to get. There's going to be abuse. Yeah. There's going to be awful martyrdom.
And we're going to see that in the next chapter. Yeah.
Exactly. There's going to be really hard times, but God is in control again and again and again. And there is a plan in heaven that we are a part of.
That's right.
And not just a part of like a hapless whoops. We're a part of, as in God is saying, no, I have designed a place for you in this.
And so, because clearly, again in this chapter, okay, yes, there is going to be this trampling, but God's putting limits, measure, and it's going to be for 3.5 years.
Yes.
So it's like I'm limiting this time. It's going to be not for a complete amount of time. It's this symbol of incompleteness, cut short, this symbol of something cut short, okay? So it's going to happen, but it's going to be cut short. And also the thing about the two witnesses is that ultimately they are victorious.
Yeah.
I mean, they're victorious in their lives, but even in their death, they're victorious, because once they ascend into heaven, it says that this great earthquake comes and this great city that is described collapses under this earthquake, and a tenth of the people perish. So, and that's just the precursor then to the seventh trumpet. Then we get the seventh trumpet,
and straight away we get the seventh trumpet that brings. Let's finish off here. Chapter 11. Yeah. The seventh trumpet brings the third terror. We get another scene in heaven where the seventh angel blew his trumpet. Loud voices shouting in heaven, and this statement just gives me chills when I read it again. The whole world has now become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he will reign forever and ever. Then there's this worship scene in heaven. Then in heaven, the temple of God was opened, and the ark of his covenant could be seen inside the temple. Lightning flashed, thunder crashed and roared. There was a great hailstorm, and the world was shaken like a...
It's awesome stuff, isn't it?
It's just awesome. Yeah. There's worship. The Ark of the Covenant is there. How did the Ark of the Covenant get into heaven? It's like Indiana Jones type of thing. Here it is. It opens up. There is thunder. And God is saying, this is part of my plan.
Yeah.
Here we go. Now I'm having my way.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's victory all the way through. So, and I think your point before is a good one. We can focus on, the trampling and no. This is victory. That is, punctuated by, yes, there's going to be travail and there's going to be persecution, but God is holding the controls, as it were, and cutting it short and limiting it and limiting its effect, and ultimately having this victory over it. It's just stunning.
Family, it's DJ here, and interrupting our journey through the book of Revelation. Oh my goodness, we're about to enter chapters 12 and 13. If you thought 10 and 11 were hard, right? Where do we get into this? But I want to let you know, circle a date in the calendar. We've been working hard behind the scenes. When are we going to do... There's a question that everybody's been asking themselves. When are we going to do the live episode 100? Well, I'm glad to be able to give you a date. Thrive Deeper episode 100 will be broadcast live across the world on Australian time Thursday night, the 23rd of July. Thursday night, the 23rd of July. We're going to be talking about the book of Revelation, chapter 19 and 20. So we're building up to that final bit there. So what we're asking you to do is please send us your questions now. If you've got questions about the book of Revelation in general, questions in particular from Revelation chapter 19 and 20, building up to the end of the book of Revelation, we would love to get them now. How do you do that? Easy. You can send it to us via our website at thrivetoday.tv. You'll see how to contact us there. Just drop us a form there at thrivetoday.tv. Drop in your questions and we will be answering them Thursday, the 23rd of July. A live recording of the episode there will be happening. And then episode 100 will come out normally as a regular episode. That recording, the audio version of that, will come out on your app the next day, Friday the 24th, normal schedule. So live the night before, you can tune in wherever you are around the place. It'll all be happening on thrivetoday.tv. So keep your eye on the website there, keep your eye on the Facebook pages, and for you to participate, we'd really love your questions in advance. So get them into us now. Again, I'll let you know, Revelation chapter 19 and 20 is what we're going to be looking at in particular, and we will be releasing that episode the next morning as per usual, ready to go there. Episode 100. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. We're into that there. And we're also going to do something special around Thrive Perspectives as well. Make sure you're subscribed to that episode, to that podcast. We have just released 2 episodes that are really impacting. We're getting so many comments about it. Thrive Perspectives, we've just released an episode on sex, gender and sexuality. So many people are commenting on that. And the new one that we've just released is about race and racism. So if you've got any questions or thoughts around that, please go have a listen to them. And we're going to be doing something with Thrive Perspectives as well. So stay tuned with that. But that's all about Thrive Deeper episode 100. Circle the calendar. Get involved. We'd love you to get amongst it. All right, let's get back into the book of Revelation now. Thrive Deeper, episode 98. You're back. DJ here with Brother Matthew, and we are looking through Revelation. We need to get through in this last half of the show, chapters 12 and 13.
And if you thought the last part was intense,
Matt,
get ready for the next part.
Again, I have to mention this because I'm such a dork. When I read this or hear it being read aloud, all I can hear in my mind is heavy metal guitar solos going through. It is the most metal parts of scripture here. This is so epic, and I can just see it like this great unfolding opera in front of us. This because again, just how he says it at the beginning. Let's see John, the opening part of chapter 12, verse 1, and then I witnessed in heaven an event of great significance.
Yeah.
Well, what is it? What have we been seeing?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. If he's having to go, yeah, all of that's really important, but this is an episode. This is war.
Yeah. Well, here we actually get to the core. It's very common to label chapters 12 and 13 the heart of the book.
Yes.
This is really establishing the core theme, which is the war between God and his people on the one hand, and the dragon and his people on the other, okay? And between the lamb and his counterpart, the beast.
Yes.
Okay? So that's what you get here. First of all, you've got the war between Satan and God's people, and then you've got the war between the lamb and the beast. So, this actually really is a very core part of the book, and it does sit in the middle here. So you've got this consummate battle. And the interesting thing, we're going to get this battle between the red dragon, right? This figure of Satan, and the woman, and the woman gives birth to this messianic figure. Okay, and I think what we'll do is we'll read through some of the specifics of this in a moment.
Yep.
Now, the interesting thing about this is that it actually fulfills not only Old Testament imagery,
yes,
but in some ways it draws in elements of pagan mythology as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we have in pagan mythology these stories where you have, a mother goddess being pursued by a dragon, that kind of thing.
The sun and moon are, the woman is clothed in the sun, and the moon is at her feet. Like, so you're getting this, heavenly body type of thing, which is rich in symbology, of so much mythology, and also some darker mythology as well.
Yeah, so in, Mesopotamia, ancient Mesopotamia, you get Marduk, the god of light, who kills the 7-headed dragon, Tiamat, who, had thrown down a third of the stars. In the Greco-Roman myth, we have the goddess Leto, pregnant with Apollo.
Yes.
And she's pursued by the dragon Python.
Yep.
And she's rescued by Poseidon, who places her in safety on an island, okay? So, and after Apollo's born, he slays Python and so forth. So these are well known at the time, and what the writer is doing really is something quite ingenious here. Because there's an element, and this is the interesting thing about mythology, is that it expresses things that lie within the consciousness talk about general revelation, that general sense of consciousness of the forces of good and evil and these sorts of things. And they are in mythology given this symbolic kind of form.
Mm-hmm.
And we see even in Genesis how that same kind of imagery gets used, and we see that here in Revelation as well, that it is drawing in these kind of symbols that not only are common in the Old Testament, but that represent in a lot of people's minds in those days, the forces of good and evil in this sense.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. And then, John adds all of these other elements from the Old Testament to fill out these truths, as though he's saying, well, the myths got it partly right.
Yeah.
But what we have here is really the big picture, the whole story.
Yeah. This is, I mean, again, I think I've already trotted it out on one of the episodes here. It's that amazing quote from C.S. Lewis. Now, C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite Christian authors, he had that, he was steeped in his, what he did as far as a teacher and an educator. It was all about pagan mythology. That's what he lived and breathed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And again, it's funny how him, as one of our most cherished Christian authors, we go, isn't that fantastic? That he was so rich in that. But nowadays, if you start looking into pagan mythology, well, you're pretty much cast out pretty much, because it's pretty, there's some dark stuff. But I love his quote. There's a great quote where he says, now the story of Christ is simply a true myth. Because he was talking about people going, Christ is just a myth. We've got all, like this passage, you've got all these echoes of it from previous stories. And he says, it's simply a true myth, a myth working on us the same way as the others, but with a tremendous difference that it actually really happened. And one must be content to accept it in the same way, remembering that this is God's myth, where the others are just man's myth. That the pagan stories are God expressing himself through the minds of poets using such images as he found there, while Christianity is God expressing himself through what we call real things.
Yeah.
That is such a deep,
it's a great picture
thinking
from
of
C.S. Lewis.
Yeah. And I love that.
So we get this imagery, and I think it's worth actually going into a little more detail here, and we'll try and move through this quickly. But it says, a great sign appeared in the heaven. This is in the NIV. Yeah. A woman clothed with the sun. Okay, now the woman here, this is the covenant people of God. The woman's like this Eve-like figure.
Would you? I always read it, and again, this is where we might differ a little bit with some of the revelation. I lean a little bit that this woman and some of these promises and some of the story here, and it is very mixed. It's blended, I know, but there's a Jewishness to it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is Israel.
Yeah.
And that's, covenant people of God.
Yes.
Because as we read on, we see that she gives birth to the Messiah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. So a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. This is this kind of authority. And there is a sense in which God gave his people this level of authority. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Okay. So this indicates that really this is a totality of oppressive power in that sense. Yeah. It's indicates its worldwide rule. Okay. So this is this satanic figure, Jesus referred to Satan as the prince of this world, so that's what we have here.
Because we've got, again, when you're thinking numbers, when you think 7, you're thinking, we've been saying God's
totality,
number, but totality, and then you've got 10, and that's sort of like complete, type of thing. So there's having 7, 10, and 7, like being repeated.
Important numbers.
Even by... even across this imagery of Satan, is like, man, this is the big bad. This is the baddie of the story.
Yeah, that's right. So it says here, verse 4, its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. Now, in Revelation, stars are identified with angels. So this could be referring to the fall of the angels during Satan's initial rebellion.
Yes.
Or whatever went on there. We could be talking about like the fallen angels, that are referred to in Jude 6.
Yes.
As well. So this could be what that's referring to. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that it might devour her child. Okay. So, we know that, like Herod, for example, tried to destroy Christ, at his birth. You've got the temptation in the wilderness, trying to, again, destroy Christ at that point. And, of course, the crucifixion as well. These attempts, satanic attempts to, as it were, devour this child, okay? Verse 5, she gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule the nations with an iron scepter. Okay, it's Psalm 2. It's a messianic phrase, okay? So this is about the Messiah. So she gave birth to a son. This is Israel giving birth to the Messiah. And her child, it says, was snatched up to God and his throne. This most probably refers to the ascension of Christ, okay? I think that there's not much doubt about that.
Yep.
The woman then says, fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God so that she might be taken care of for 1,260 days, 3.5 years.
Years, yep.
Okay. So what is this escape to the wilderness? Now, look, this could, if you're taking if we take this as perhaps alluding to the flight of the church from the Roman army, maybe if you take that perspective, it could refer to the 70th week of Daniel, okay? The tribulation of Israel in that sense,
yes.
Okay? So if we take the woman as a symbol of Israel, then and the 3.5 year period within the 7th year tribulation,
yes,
we could well be talking about, and a lot of people, certainly some people at least
would camp in that spot.
Camp in that spot. That this is the 70th week of Daniel. There's a neatness about that as well.
Incredibly so.
So this according to that view, refers to a protection of a part of the nation, perhaps during the Great Tribulation before Christ's return, or of the whole of Israel for a part of the time, however you want to put that. That's according to that view. Or, it could allude to a period of time during which the church is protected from the dragon. These are other, again, because in a sense the church is grafted into Israel, so this is God's people as a whole. I am attracted to views that broaden it.
Yes.
That because this is speaking to
us as well.
Yeah, to us as well. It's speaking to the early church that was made up of a lot of Jewish people.
Yes.
So think of very much a Jewish church at this stage who are see themselves as the faithful remnant.
Yeah.
Remember, the early church saw themselves as the faithful remnant of Israel, right?
Yep.
So it's quite likely that they're reading this as they're being sent out into the wilderness. This is a place of persecution. They're suffering this. This is us, okay? And God's going to take care of us.
Yeah.
Or projecting forward to this period of tribulation when this is going to happen in that very literal form.
And that thing that I always talk about prophecy, that Revelation, fully fits into, that it has multiple fulfillments and it sort of bounces between time.
Yeah.
Like time doesn't work normally in these prophecies because in one sense we're getting glimpses of stuff that has happened, like the fall, like we even see in a moment the fall of Satan out of heaven. And we see, angels, and it's like, well, hang on, that happened at this part of this, history. Yeah. But he's seeing it again afresh now.
Yeah.
Or is he just relaying this? And we're seeing these things bounce around. And, I don't think part of me, having grown up in the environment where it's on a chart with a date and a number and a map.
And very literal,
very literal. There's part of me, again, that I too am attracted, though I lean that way, I too am attracted to it being fulfilled in both ways. And it's deeper than what we just...
I like that, I think that's... Because there is a sense in which this is speaking to those people then. So there was a sense that they could have looked at this and said, this is happening.
Yes.
And yet we can still take that idea and it can still refer to a future tribulation.
Yeah. Yeah. And so so when we get into this next part here in chapter 12, verses 7, to 9 here, where the devil, and again, John just comes out and says it, no mincing the words now. This is Satan. This is the devil. This is the one. There's a war in heaven. Michael and the angels fight against, Satan and his angels, and he is cast out of heaven, the dragon is thrown down to earth. Well, does that happen in the book of Revelation? Like, is that in the future, or is John seeing that as a moment that happened in the past? I don't know.
Or does this describe this whole period that we're living in?
Yeah.
And in some ways, it could describe this. It could describe then and now, this whole period, and culminately in the future.
Yeah.
Because that's how biblical prophecy works. So we have, it says, then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought the dragon and so forth. And it talks about, and he was hurled down to the earth. And then we have this chorus. I mean, this is great. It's like this, in a sense, these hymns function like, the choruses in a Greek plays, in ancient Greek plays, that he's been hurled down and they triumph. And this is where actually it says that they triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony.
Yeah.
Because it says for the accuser, praise the Lord, for the accuser of our brothers and sisters who accuses them before our God day and night has been hurled down. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you so forth. So there's triumph here. And then, so we have this dragon hurled down. It says, when the dragon saw that he had been hurled down to earth, it says here, he pursued the woman. Okay, so this probably marks the beginning of the Great Tribulation, okay, spoken of by Jesus in Matthew 24 and so forth. It's or however you want to put that, or if you could take this to refer to persecution of God's people generally, but culminating in a final persecution. It says he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given the two wings of a great eagle. So that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness.
Again, there's that wilderness again where she's escaping to.
Yeah, that's right. So the idea of being, lifted up on eagle's wings is a very common Old Testament imagery, referring to God, lifting up his people and so forth, protecting his people. But she flies to a place prepared for her in the wilderness where it says she will be taken care of for a times, and half a time. Yeah. Okay. That's the 3.5 years again. Okay.
And then again, in my growing up, in my understanding of the book of Revelation and how I was taught, the book of Revelation was seen as a very Jewish book. Yep. As in, like, we've got the letters to the churches.
Yep.
We got this sense that, there's a calledness. John represents the church being called into heaven. And now the rest of the time is Daniel's 70th week, where it's all about the church. Yeah. It's all about the Jewish people. Yeah. And there's don't get me wrong, I still sort of lean that way to a lot of it. There is so much here about God dealing with the Jewish people. But then it's little bits like this at the end of chapter 12 where it says, the dragon became angry at the woman, declared war against the rest of her children, and then John gives a definition of the children. Yeah. All who keep God's commands and confess that they belong to Jesus. And I was like, well, that's us.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I mean? Like, so there's that multiple level of
So I think, yes, it because, people want to say, well, this refers to Israel. But when you get definitions like that, well, yes, it is. But it also it's all of God's people.
I love it. I love it.
And you keep mentioning the 70th week of Daniel. I wonder if it's worth a quick and you're going to be like, I'm talking like a few lines. A few lines. I mean, the book of Daniel is the most amazing piece of prophecy in the Old Testament, full stop, right? Yeah.
And in the middle of the book of Daniel, in chapter 9, it's the 70th week of Daniel, where well,
there's the 69 weeks, isn't there?
So in the picture of that, Daniel is praying to God, we even hear the prayer of Daniel. And Daniel's prayer is about what will happen to my people, what will happen to the Jewish people, because he's in Babylon. Yeah. You know what I mean? And and it's this time. He is praying, and then we get this amazing scenes, and we see multiple different scenes, but God is answering, in the heavenlies, with angels and all these different things, answering his prayer and giving him an amazing prophecy, the most amazing prophecy, I think, in the Old Testament. Yeah. how is God going to deal with the Jews? Well, there's going to be a Messiah. The Messiah will be cut off, and the period of dealing with the Jews is a period of 70 lots of 7.
Yeah.
You know, it's this repetition, and there's lots of ways to interpret it. But if you take it into an actual period of years and how the years work, basically, from the time that Christ is crucified, God, you know, the interpretation that most of the church would take.
Well, you skipped something there.
Okay.
So he basically prophesies that from the rebuilding of the temple,
Yes.
to the coming of the anointed one who will be cut off,
Yes.
will be
400 and
490 years when you put the sevens, because it's
Yes.
talking about groups of 7 years, 69 sevens or whatever, and he predicts the time pretty much to the right on.
Well, now we know in history, in the hindsight of history, we look back and go, actually, that happened like nearly to the day.
Yeah, that's right. So, but then you think, well, hang on, but that's the 69. What about the 70?
Yeah. So brings
me to where you were.
And so there's another 7 years left, basically.
Yeah. So when is that? Is the question?
Well, and then we see it perfectly laying out here in the 7 years of the tribulation.
Yeah.
That is cut into three.
And that's that view. And look, there are some other ways of looking at that, but the idea is that the church period is this pause, this gap, and then you pick up the prophetic calendar again at the beginning of the tribulation.
And that echoes with both prophecy in the Old Testament and what was happening in the New Testament, what the testimony of the New Testament is, and the testimony that we see now living in the year 2020 of history is that God has basically said, and he said he was going to do this all through the Old Testament, there's going to be a time where I'll press pause on dealing with the Jewish people, and I will deal with the rest of the people, bring in all the fullness of salvation for the rest of the people, for the whole world. Yeah. And when that's done, well, then I go back to dealing with you Jews.
Yeah. And that's
a really simple, silly way to say it.
And I, as I said, I think there's something neat, about that. I think it answers a lot of questions. I think we need to hold that open-handedly. Yes. I would put it this way. Because,
that's a great way to put it.
Because,
I agree.
The Jews had a very fixed idea of what the Messiah was going to look like the first time, and they got it wrong.
Yes. We don't want to be guilty of the same thing. I know.
Let's open-handedly hold our views. But I think that's one way of looking at that. So that's based on that very literal reading with very much a focus on Israel. In any case, all of those factors are there. God's not finished with Israel; He's still working with them. His covenant is an everlasting covenant. But I also think it's important to recognize that Revelation moves seemingly seamlessly between allusions to Israel and then the whole church. It just seems to go from one to the other, and the lines are blurred.
And in the end, even though for me growing up and I'll say this with all love and respect and thankfulness of my childhood, I would say I grew up as a Pharisee, type of thing. I grew up being taught being taught by the best of the Pharisees, and I love that. That's why I always lean towards the Pharisees, leaning towards them in the Gospels. I was like, those poor Pharisees. I grew up in that way and being very literal with everything. Now, the beauty of seeing the blendedness of it all here is that beauty that Paul calls us to, and Peter calls us to, and I think even Jesus calls us to, that, we are one people. And I think that's reflected in the book of Revelation.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
Well, we better move into chapter 14. Just one thing about 13. The thing I love about the end of chapter 12 is that it says here that from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river. You think this. Again, what the waters and the condemnation and the chaos and all of that. But the earth helped the woman by opening up its mouth and swallowing the river. Is that like the grave open? Is that, you think of the rebellion of Korah and it's a beautiful, and then we have the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring. And this is Genesis 3:15, which you will strike his heel and he will crush your head. So that's already prophesied there. Which brings us,
oh boy,
to chapter 13.
Now, chapter 13. This is where we see, I think, what was alluded to before, the beast, the origin of the beast.
That's right. So Satan's attack against the woman and her offspring that we've just seen centers now on the beast who emerges from the sea. Okay, so this is kind of the same. It's the same situation, but it's described one way in chapter 12 and then another way in chapter 13. That's essentially, I think, what we've got here. So what happens is that the beast takes on the image of the dragon himself. It's kind of sequential in a sense too, because it's adding detail, because the beast is coming at the behest of the dragon.
And this is where it gets confusing.
So you got the dragon.
This is where it gets confusing, because the dragon, we will see, especially at the beginning of the introduction here, we go, hang on, the beast is the dragon and the dragon is the beast.
So we're getting more detail. Yeah, no.
And but then all of a sudden, they have split. Like there
into
is
two beasts, yeah. So you've got this, okay, let me put it this way. You've got the unholy trinity.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping you would get to.
I think this is mimicking here.
Yes,
okay.
100%.
So we've talked in general terms about this battle in chapter 12. Now we've got more detail here. Okay, so then you've got the dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. Now think about everything that the sea represents. Okay, chaos, death, the underworld,
sin.
Yeah, all of this stuff. Okay, so it had 10 horns with 7 heads and 10 crowns on its horns, and each had a blasphemous name. Okay, so this is an allusion to Daniel chapter 7. This is the fulfillment of in a sense, the beasts that come out of the sea.
Oh, Daniel saw all of this as well.
And
yes.
and in Daniel, it's talking about these worldly powers, right? Yep. So this is the culmination of all worldly powers, really. In rebellion against God.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just got to say this because I'm such a dork, and I know you'll get a kick out of this. You know how I've been banging on about time travel with this type of period here. If I was making a movie of this, right? Yeah. If I was making a movie of this, and here's little John standing on a hill, type of thing, seeing this all happen on a hill that's slightly further away, I would get him to glance over his shoulder, and there's Daniel.
Yeah.
Seeing the same thing from a different viewpoint.
Yeah.
Because
that's a good picture.
Because Daniel is looking at the same event, type of thing. And you realize that, man, God has been taking these prophets through different time scenarios, looking at the same thing in different ways. And this is John getting the best view of it all and trying his best to explain it all.
Yeah. And that connection with Daniel is underscored in verse 2, where he says, the beast I saw resembled a leopard, had the feet like a bear, mouth like a lion. Okay, so this is, again, Daniel chapter 7. Seeing the same thing here.
Now, this is where it gets interesting, because first off, as we're coming out of Dragon and we're looking at this, I immediately, without knowing anything, look at this and go, okay, this is another retelling of what the dragon looked like. But then we have a separation. And the dragon gave him his own power and throne and great authority.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, hang on, this is the beast is separate to the dragon.
Yeah, so they seem to be identified and then they're separate. Again, this is very much like God the Father, God the Son.
Yes.
And we're going to see a third. So we've got the unholy trinity here. Now, the mimicking is now ramps up when you get on one of the heads of the beast he seemed to have a fatal wound.
Yes.
Now, literally in the Greek, it reads something like, and one of its heads had been killed to death.
Yes.
And the wound of its death was healed. So it's mimicking the lamb that had been slain.
100%.
So...
And the world gets it. The world understands exactly what's going on. The people in the world who have rejected Christ and rejected God and rejected all of these things, they understand what's going on, and they are called to worship the
That's right.
beast.
So it's literally the Antichrist in the sense that resembles this, father-son relationship, the wound, that had been healed. And then people worship the dragon because he'd been given authority, because he had given authority to the beast. Okay. Mm-hmm. So people worship, the dragon through the beast, as it were, and they worship, who is like the beast, who can wage war against it. Okay. So you've got this, the beast is mimicking Christ in this sense. So it's truly the Antichrist.
I love that line. Of, it's like a great filmmaker putting in a line at the beginning of a scene, it's going to come back to play later on. It's that loaded gun principle. The fact that the crowds are saying, there's no one greater, who can fight him, who can stand up against him, And you're like, okay, we're going to see.
Yeah.
You know, that's setting up the ante.
And it's interesting what happens from here, because from verse 5, it says, the beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and so forth. Verse 7, the beast was given power to wage war against God's holy people and conquer them. And was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. So again, who is doing the giving here? Well, this is God controlling things.
Great point.
And because it's connected with the 42 months, we hear the 3.5 years again. So again, for a limited time, God is allowing the beast to exercise this level of power. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and it's power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them.
Oof.
So this looks like defeat, but what looks like defeat in a worldly sense becomes victory in an ultimate sense, exactly as it was with the crucifixion of Christ. It looked like the ultimate, that there was this sense in the crucifixion of Christ in which Satan was given authority to slay Christ.
Yes.
And yet that authority to conquer Christ led to the very downfall of Satan there and the victory of Christ.
Totally
we have the same thing happening here. Exactly the same thing happening here.
Yeah.
So, and then we have all the inhabitants of the earth worshipping the beast and so forth. And
there's an interesting little point here that brings us back to remembering that John was written to a people of his time in the 90s AD there. And this is where you get this in verse 9 of chapter 13, where he says, anyone who is willing to hear should listen and understand. The people who are destined for prison will be arrested and taken away. Those who are destined for death will be killed. But do not be dismayed, for here is your opportunity to have endurance and faith.
Cool. What are you reading from there?
That's a New Living Translation. Sorry.
That's like adding a few.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's actually
capturing
good.
the spirit.
Yeah, I think that's capturing actually what this means. So there's this sense of beware, be ready, and because it says there, then this calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. So, it's like hang in there, because what's going to look like defeat, this is really important. What looks like defeat is actually going to be victory. This is a really important principle for us. Often what looks like defeat is actually the beginning of a victory. I think that's a great principle. This brings us then to the beast, the second beast. Okay.
Verse 11. In chapter 11. Now, this is where, I'll be honest with you.
Verse 11 of chapter 13.
Sorry, verse 11 of chapter 13. For a lot of people, I think this is going to be pretty confusing.
Well,
so
sometimes it's confusing for me.
So let's do our best here as we wrap it. We're running out of time with this episode. Let's wrap it up for this last part of 13.
So we've got, then I saw a second beast. Okay, this is the third person of the unholy Trinity, as it were, coming out of the earth. Okay, so first came out of the sea, this comes out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb. Okay, it's mimicking. Again, this is mimicking the lamb. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of God's people. Because of the signs, it was given power to perform, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast. So this is like a religious figure. So the sense that you get, you've got the dragon who represents Satan, then you've got this political figure in the unholy Trinity, or this, but then you've got this almost religious figure as well. Here in this, which is the second beast. And, he really aligns with a lot of what is said about, first of all, in Deuteronomy 13, it talks about false prophets foretelling by dreams and doing miracles and wonders, and, it foretells that. Jesus also in Matthew 24 says at that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Messiah, or there is, do not believe it, for false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect.
Yeah.
Okay. So this in a culminate sense happening. Okay.
Yeah.
Also talks about in 2 Thessalonians 2, it says the coming of the lawless one, or the Antichrist, will be in accordance with how Satan works. He will use all sorts of displays of power through signs and wonders that serve the lie. Okay. So it's got that same idea here. Okay. So, they set up this image, and then the image comes to life, and all of these ways of deceiving people, okay? And it says in verse 16 that the beast also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, okay? A mark. This is the mark of the beast. Now, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. Oh, we'll get onto that bit in a moment. So the mark of the beast. Okay, now this is, first of all, this is
obviously it's obviously the barcode on the back of my credit card, and we're all been tricked into it. Yeah.
Right.
I'm joking. Sorry, everybody got to say that.
Look, I mean, haven't there been all sorts of theories about what this is? But
I remember being. Let me just interject here. Sorry, Matt. Yeah. I got to bring in the stupidity.
You're going to bring all of the conspiracy.
I know. I remember being a kid growing up in the conservative church that I grew up in. That I love, and I love that I did, and there's no shame in any of that. But I remember this traveling preacher coming through, the traveling evangelist, and I think it was on the back of watching Thief of the Night movies from the 60s and stuff, and reading the book of Revelation for the first time as a kid, and I was freaking out. And this guy comes up and he's talking about buying and selling and the mark of the beast and all this technology and everything. And again, I'm talking, this is going to be early 80s, right? And then he says, and the number of the beast is 666, and he's got these different sixes on the screen. And he said, this is, we've got to be clever about this, and we've got to look at it in different barcodes, and he's bringing all this other technology of the time. And he says, now have a look at what is the most common way of selling right now, the bank card. Now, people don't even know what a bank card is. And, bank card was being accepted everywhere. Bank card signs were going up everywhere. And the B in the bank card, like the logo of the bank card, was 3 B's on top of each other, lowercase b's on top of each other, multicolored. And he was like, you bring the 3 6s together.
Okay.
Like a lowercase b. And there's the B of the bank card. I remember for the rest of the next day.
Yeah, I heard that. Yep.
We're driving out. My dad's putting petrol in the car, and on all the things, bank card accepted here. I'm freaking out as a kid, going, Dad, look, it's a bank card. And I remember my dad, who was not he was a sincere Christian, but a very common, simple, understanding way. And he was just like, sometimes, son, you got to take it as a grain of salt, buddy.
Yeah, I'm well, there's something about like the forehand and the head, and I mean the things that I've heard about moneyless society and
chipping
and chipping, putting something in your hand. I mean, this has been seriously proposed about having a chip in your hand. That
not just seriously proposed; it's in trials in different countries.
That's right.
They're sincerely,
and then because someone could cut off your hand, so you put it on your forehead as well, and so. I mean, this kind of stuff. So that that's interesting to think. Oh man, like is that what that's taught? But I mean, it doesn't mean that you then like if that happened.
Yeah.
Let's say this is the new way of banking. You get the chips put in. Yep. Would you get it put in?
Well, this is great. I love this.
Maybe I shouldn't ask that.
Well, I love that question because, and again, this is the thing that I mean, as from that fear as a little kid. Like reading through this, I then had to go back and start rereading it, and I realized this is not a trick.
No.
This is not a trick. It's not like Satan and God.
Well, this part's these people are already worshipping the beast.
That's it.
And so it's somehow there's some level of using that to draw people into this.
Yeah.
So whatever this means. Now, okay, let's just get back to the actual text itself, if I may, to finish this off.
Sorry.
This is really the satanic counterpart of the sealing of the saints.
Amen.
That we've seen in chapter 7, okay?
And that's even brought up later on in the book.
Right. Now, it's also, so in Deuteronomy, God told the Jews to place the Shema on their hands and foreheads, okay?
Yes.
So this is the basis of the things that the Jewish people tie around their
phylacteries that you see them wrap around
their wrist and then on their heads as well. Okay,
so which is copies of the law.
Yeah,
so
it's like the satanic counterpart of that.
Yes,
basically. Okay, so that's the role that this has in the text. So whether, I mean, and it's interesting. Whatever this may look like literally, it's in the text. It has that connection. Okay, and the idea here is to force people. Because, you can't buy or sell is to force people into this worship of the beast. Okay,
Yep.
So now verse 18. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666.
Cue the guitar solo.
Yeah.
The heavy
Thank
metal
you.
guitar solo right
Thank
there.
you.
This is the most metal part of the whole, the whole thing. Yeah, exactly.
So, basically, I mean, the most frequently named option for 666, and this works remarkably well because if you transliterate it into Hebrew, okay, and Hebrew letters were ascribed numbers, okay. Now, to cut a long story short, I could break this down, but I won't.
Yep.
Given the way that Hebrew letters work out, and if you put numbers to them, what is spelt out by 666 is Nero Caesar.
Yeah.
Now, Nero Caesar by this time was long gone.
Yes.
If we take this in the decades, here's
Yes.
decades before.
Yep.
But he was the first one to persecute systematically.
Yes.
I should persecute.
Yes.
The first pagan ruler. Let me put, because of course Saul, there was the persecutions
Yes.
of the Sanhedrin and so forth. So
But doing it in that governmental, political fashion.
political
systematic.
fashion. Okay, so this is most probably it's like this kind of thing. So in the spirit of, because in Thessalonians it talks about the power of lawlessness.
Yes.
Being already at work in the world. And, Paul's could be saying that during the time of Nero, in fact.
Yep.
So this power's already at work in the world. So it's this anti-Christian, anti-Christ power, because Nero set himself up to be, as the emperor to be worshipped, the emperor's lord, all of that, persecuted Christians.
Yep.
Okay, it's that kind of thing come to full fruition.
Yeah.
666. So,
Yeah.
so Christians are living with the memory of
Nero.
the Nero Caesar. They're under a time of another persecution now. This is this kind of thing.
Yep.
So, in a sense, this is what you're experiencing. Saints have already experienced this back in Nero's time,
Yep.
and it's going to happen in a culminant sense up in the future.
And I've always, and when I got to that understanding as a young man, I understood that this is my dumb layman's interpretation of this.
Yeah.
This is John being able to say, listen, this has now gone to a level of, and this is what the number represents, and this is what I want you to understand and remember. We're talking full governmental, political oppression, anti-Christian type of way. It's in that spirit. That's what you've got to remember. It's in that type of mode.
Yeah.
That's why we're talking about buying and selling, the mark of all of this type of stuff.
Let me finish with this thought. When Jesus talked about future events, the major message is get ready.
Yeah.
Be ready.
Yeah.
Be sober, alert, and awake. Don't let your faith get down to a dull flicker. It needs to be burning really strong. Yeah,
oil in the lamps.
Like it's the oil in the lamps, right? Stay strong. Don't get too connected with the world system, okay? Just be in the world. Make sure you're not of the world. Keep your faith burning, because when this comes, you won't stand if your faith you're going to get swept up by it if you're not ready.
Yeah.
It's like, again, the lamps, Matthew chapter 25, that's the key thing here. There is nothing to be afraid of here, because the main message through this to a people who were going through this at the time is what looks like defeat is actually victory. You are following the same continuum as Christ. You are suffering as Christ suffered, and he called us to take up our cross and follow him, but it will lead to victory. God has you, God wins in the end, and we will be victorious in the end.
Victory in the end. That is, I think that if you had to sum up or give the byline there of the book of Revelation, that is it. It's victory in the end. What we really want you to think about and remember and ponder that as you read through these passages, as you go through the book of Revelation, as you join us in the Thrive Daily Reading Guide, it's that victory in the end we'd love you to think about. We love going through this and we love you contacting us. Remember that we're going to be doing a live Thrive Deeper episode 100. We'd love your questions about the book of Revelation, especially from chapters 18, 19, 20, around that type of area there. Please send those questions in. You can do that all over at thrivetoday.tv. You can get copies of the book. You can get copies of the digital copies as well of Thrive, the Daily Reading Guide, but you can do that all over at thrivetoday.tv. We'll see you in a fortnight. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Thrive Deeper. Matthew and DJ really appreciate the questions and thoughts about what you're reading in the Bible as you go through it with Thrive. Our home on the internet is thrivetoday.tv. You can contact us, ask questions, see all of our resources and much more at our website, thrivetoday.tv. The Thrive Today Network is on Facebook. Our Facebook page and links to our community groups are waiting for you. Just search and like Thrive Today page in Facebook now. Visit ratethispodcast.com/Thrive Deeper. If you appreciate what we do and want to help us reach more people, go to ratethispodcast.com/Thrive Deeper. Until next time, our prayer is that these shows will inspire you to go deeper into God's Word and thrive. This was another DJP.FM production.